Listen, lady, I've been around the block more times than you've had hot dinners. I don't need your damn permission to park my truck in front of my own house. That's how I introduced myself to the neighborhood, yelling at a woman named Karen in the driveway of my new lakeside cabin in Oakwood Estates, Virginia. I'm Frank, 62 years old, a retired mechanic who's seen enough crap to last 2 lifetimes. After decades of busting my ass in the city, I finally cashed out for my dream spot, a 2-story cabin with a big porch, surrounded by oaks, right next to Lake Serenity. I pictured quiet days fishing and drinking beer, but nope. 5 minutes in, and here comes Karen, the HOA president, acting like she owns the whole damn state. It started when I pulled up in my rented moving truck, a beast of a 26-footer loaded with everything I own. My buddies, Joe and Mike, were helping me unload when I heard her heels clicking like a damn executioner. Karen, mid-50s, blonde hair stiff as a board, strutted up in a beige pantsuit, sunglasses perched on her nose despite the clouds. She sized me up like I was trash. "Excuse me," she barked. "What do you think you're doing parking that thing here? This is Oakwood Estates. Not a truck stop?" I dropped a box of wrenches and wiped my brow. "Name's Frank. Just bought this place. Moving in." She didn't flinch. "Well, Frank, that truck's against HOA rules. It's an eyesore, and I won't have it ruining our property values." "Lady, it's here for a few hours," I snapped. "What's your problem?" Her smirk made me want to punch something. "My problem is you. I'm calling the police." I laughed, loud and pissed. "The cops? For moving into my own damn house?" "You're nuts," she ignored me, already on her phone. "Yes, police? There's a man here with an illegal truck blocking the street and threatening me." "Send someone now." Threatening her? I'd barely started. But sure enough, 10 minutes later, a cop car rolled up. 2 officers, one old and tired, one young and confused, stepped out. The older one, Officer Daniels, looked at Karen like he'd seen this show before. "Ma'am," he said. "What's the issue this time?" Karen pointed at me. "This man's breaking HOA rules and threatened me when I told him to move that truck." Daniels turned to me. "ID and proof you live here?" I handed over my license and house papers. He nodded. "Looks good. Can you move the truck soon, though? Keep the peace?" "Yeah, in an hour," I said. He tipped his hat. "Good enough, ma'am. This ain't an emergency. Let's not waste more time." Karen glared and stomped off, but I knew she wasn't done. That night, alone with my boxes, I stared out at Lake Serenity. The moon lit the water, but all I could think about was Karen. I dug into the HOA docs my agent sent. Most of it was petty nonsense, but the lake stuff, shady as hell. They claimed management rights, but it sounded like a power grab. Something wasn't right. Next morning, I met Walter, my neighbor, a grizzled old guy watering his roses. "Heard you met Karen," he said with a grin. "Yeah," I growled. "What's her deal?" "She's HOA queen," he said. "Runs this place like a dictator. Fined a guy $5,000 for a mailbox she didn't like. And the lake? Used to be free for all. Now she controls it." "She what?" I felt my blood boil. How'd she get away with that?" Walter shrugged. "Money. Power. People are too scared to fight." I wasn't scared. I was pissed. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. "So, where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments below." The lake that wasn't hers, I stood on my porch that Sunday morning, coffee mug in hand, staring out at Lake Serenity. The water sparkled under the early sun, but all I could think about was Walter's words echoing in my head. She controls it. Karen, that power-hungry HOA queen, had turned a public lake into her personal kingdom. I wasn't just pissed anymore. I was on a mission. If this woman thought she could bully me into submission like she did the rest of Oakwood Estates, she was in for a rude awakening. I'd spent 40 years fixing engines, dealing with crooks trying to scam me out of parts or labor. Karen wasn't scaring me. She was just another con I needed to expose. I set my mug down, grabbed my laptop, and spread out every document from the home purchase across my kitchen table. The HOA handbook was a beast. 50 pages of rules about mailbox heights, approved paint colors, and how many damn Christmas lights you could string up. But the section on Lake Serenity, that's where things got fishy. It was all vague nonsense about exclusive management authority and community preservation. Not a single line said the HOA owned the lake. Hell, it didn't even mention a deed or legal title. I've read enough shady contracts in my time to know when someone's blowing smoke. And this reeked of it. All right, Karen, I muttered to myself, cracking my knuckles. Let's see what you're hiding. I started digging online, pulling up public records for Lake Serenity. The county assessor's website was a clunky mess. But after an hour of cursing at slow servers, I found it. The lake was listed as state property, managed by the Virginia Department of Natural Resources. Public access was guaranteed by law. My jaw dropped. Son of a bitch, I said aloud. Karen wasn't just overstepping, she was flat out lying to everyone, acting like she owned a lake that belonged to the whole damn state. I needed more than a website to nail her, though I needed neighbors to talk. So, I laced up my boots and headed out to do some old-school recon. First stop was Walter's place again. He was out back, tinkering with a birdhouse, his hands covered in sawdust. "Back so soon, Frank," he said, chuckling. "Karen, get under your skin already?" "Damn right she did," I replied, leaning against his fence. "Tell me more about this lake bullshit. You said it used to be open to everyone?" Walter nodded, wiping his hands on his jeans. "Yep. Back in the 90s, this place was like a community park. Kids swam, folks fished, we had barbecues on the shore. Then Karen took over the HOA 5 years ago, and boom, signs went up. Members only. No trespassing. She even started charging people to use the dock." "Charging?" I raised an eyebrow. "What, like a toll booth?" "Pretty much," he said. $50 to fish, 100 for a picnic. She said it was for maintenance, but I never saw a dime go to the lake. Meanwhile, she's got a new Lexus every year." I clenched my fists. "That's theft. Walter. She's scamming everyone." He sighed. "I know, but she's got the whole neighborhood spooked. Calls the cops, files complaints, threatens lawsuits. People just pay up or move out." I wasn't done. I thanked Walter and headed across the street to meet Sarah, a single mom I'd seen pushing a stroller by the lake. She was outside, watching her 6-year-old daughter, Emma, draw chalk pictures on the driveway. I introduced myself, and when I mentioned Karen, Sarah's face tightened. "She's a nightmare," Sarah said, her voice low so Emma wouldn't hear. "Last summer, Emma was playing by the lake, building a sandcastle. Karen came out of nowhere, screaming that it was private property. Told me she'd call Child Protective Services if I let my kid trespass again." "You're shitting me," I said, my blood boiling. "She threatened your kid over a sandcastle?" Sarah nodded, her eyes glistening. "Emma loved that lake. It's where she learned to skip rocks. Now she's scared to go near it. Karen's taken that joy from her." I felt a knot in my gut. This wasn't just about property rules anymore, it was personal. Karen was stealing memories, bullying families, and getting away with it. I promised Sarah I'd look into it and headed back home, my mind racing. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept picturing Emma's sandcastle, Sarah's teary eyes, Walter's defeated shrug. Karen wasn't just a pain in the ass. She was a tyrant. I opened my laptop again, diving deeper into state records. By 2 a.m., I'd found gold, a 1995 state ordinance confirming Lake Serenity was public land, with no private ownership claims allowed. Karen's whole HOA controls the Lake Act was a lie, and I had the proof. But proof wasn't enough. Karen wasn't going to back down because I waved some papers in her face. She'd fight dirty, I could feel it. Sure enough, the next morning, I woke up to a neon yellow violation notice taped to my front door. Grass exceeds 3.5 inches. $200 fine due by Friday. It read, signed by Karen herself. I laughed out loud. My grass was barely an inch long. I'd mowed it 2 days ago. She was grasping at straws, trying to scare me off. Then came the signs. By noon, new metal plaques were up around the lake. HOA members only. Violators will be prosecuted. I watched Karen from my porch, strutting around in her golf cart, barking orders at some poor landscaper. She looked like a wannabe cop, her sunglasses glinting as she scanned the neighborhood for troublemakers like me. The final straw came that evening. I was carrying a trash can to the curb when I noticed a security camera on a pole across the street, pointed straight at my front door. Not the road, not her property, my damn house. You've got to be kidding me, I growled, stomping over to her place. She was on her porch, sipping wine like she was royalty. Karen, I shouted. What's with the camera? You spying on me now? She smirked, not even looking up. It's for community safety. Frank, if you're not doing anything wrong, you shouldn't care. Bullshit, I snapped. You're watching my house like I'm a criminal. Take it down or I'll rip it out myself. She stood, her voice icy. Threaten me again, and I'll have you arrested. I walked away before I said something I'd regret, but I was done playing nice. Karen wanted a war? She'd get one. I spent the next 2 nights digging through every database I could find. County records, state laws, even old newspaper articles about Lake Serenity. By Wednesday, I had a stack of printouts proving the lake was public, plus emails from a Department of Natural Resources officer confirming it. They were interested. Real interested. If someone's restricting access to state property, the officer wrote, that's a serious violation. Send us everything you've got. I was ready to take her down, but Karen wasn't slowing down either. Thursday morning, she announced a Lake Appreciation Day for Saturday, an HOA-exclusive event to celebrate our private oasis. The flyer was plastered everywhere with her name in bold, hosted by Karen Mitchell, HOA president. It was a slap in my face, a way to flex her power and rub it in that she controlled the lake. But she didn't know I was coming with a megaphone and a plan. As I loaded my evidence into a backpack, I felt a fire in my chest. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was for Sarah's kid, for Walter, for every neighbor Karen had bullied. You picked the wrong old man. Karen, I muttered, zipping up the bag. Saturday was going to be a hell of a day. So, what do you think's coming next? Drop a fire emoji in the comments if you've ever wanted to stick it to a bully like Karen. The sun was barely up on Saturday morning when I stepped onto my porch. My backpack slung over one shoulder and a cheap megaphone I'd ordered off Amazon tucked under my arm. Lake Serenity shimmered in the distance, but my eyes were locked on the pavilion across the water, where Karen's Lake Appreciation Day was already in full swing. Banners screamed HOA members only, and a catering truck was unloading trays of fancy sandwiches while a local news van parked nearby. Karen was out there, strutting like a queen, her blonde hair bouncing as she barked orders at volunteers. She thought this was her victory lap, a big middle finger to me and anyone else who dared question her reign over Oakwood Estates. Oh, Karen, you dumbass. You just handed me the perfect stage to bury you. I'd spent the last 2 days preparing for war. My backpack was stuffed with printouts from the Virginia Department of Natural Resources, county records, and that 1995 ordinance proving Lake Serenity was public property. I'd even gotten a call from a state officer named Linda Hayes, who sounded like she ate HOA presidents for breakfast. "Frank," she'd said, "if what you're saying is true, this is a felony-level violation. Restricting public land access for profit? That's not just wrong, it's illegal as hell." She promised to have someone on standby if things got messy today. I was ready to light the fuse. As I walked toward the lake, my boots crunching on the gravel path, I could feel the adrenaline pumping. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was for Sarah's kid, Emma, who couldn't build sandcastles without Karen's threats. It was for Walter, who'd watched his community turn into a dictatorship. It was for every neighbor too scared to speak up. I wasn't just fighting for my right to fish, I was fighting for what was right. Period. The pavilion was buzzing when I got there. About 60 people milled around, families eating barbecue, kids chasing balloons, and a few HOA loyalists clapping like trained seals as Karen took the stage. She wore a white blazer, like some kind of wannabe politician, and her voice boomed through a microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen of Oakwood Estates," she announced, her tone dripping with self-important bullshit. "Today we celebrate our lake, a treasure we've fought to protect from outsiders who don't respect our values. This is our sanctuary, and I'm proud to lead the charge in keeping it exclusive." The crowd clapped, but I caught a few uneasy glances. People weren't as sold on her crap as she thought. I pushed through to the front, my megaphone in hand, and waited for the perfect moment. Karen was mid-sentence, waxing poetic about community standards, when I flipped the switch on my megaphone and let it rip. "Hey, Karen!" My voice cut through the air like a chainsaw. "Before you keep lying to these folks about your lake, how about you show us the deed that says the HOA owns it?" The crowd froze. Forks stopped mid-bite. Kids stopped running. All eyes turned to me, then to Karen, whose face went from smug to pissed in half a second. The news crew, sensing drama, swung their camera my way. "Excuse me?" Karen screeched, her voice cracking like a teenager's. "This is a private event, and you're trespassing. Security. Remove this man." Her security was her husband, Gary, a balding guy in a polo shirt who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. He shuffled toward me but stopped when I held up my stack of documents. "Actually, Karen," I said, my megaphone making every word echo across the lake, "I've got proof right here, straight from the state, that Lake Serenity is public property. You've been lying to everyone for years, charging them to use what belongs to all of us." The crowd erupted in murmurs. People pulled out their phones, some recording, others whispering to their neighbors. Karen's face turned redder than a stoplight. "That's nonsense," she shouted, grabbing the microphone tighter. "These are fake documents. He's trying to ruin our community with lies." I wasn't backing down. I pulled out the ordinance and held it high. "This is from the Virginia Department of Natural Resources, dated 1995. Says right here, Lake Serenity is state property with public access guaranteed by law. You want to call that fake? Go ahead. Explain it to the state investigator I talked to yesterday." That's when the news reporter, a sharp-eyed woman named Jessica, stepped forward, her microphone ready. "Ma'am," she said to Karen, "if these documents are accurate, what authority does the HOA have to restrict lake access?" Karen's eyes darted around like a cornered animal. "This is our lake," she screamed. "We've maintained it, protected it. This man is an outsider trying to destroy our way of life." But her voice was shaking now, and the crowd wasn't buying it. A guy in a baseball cap, Tom, a realtor who lived down the street, grabbed one of my printouts and scanned it. "Holy shit," he said loud enough for everyone to hear. "This is legit. State letterhead, official stamps. Karen, what the hell have you been doing? The murmurs turned into a roar. People started shouting questions. Is this true? Have you been charging us for a public lake? What else have you lied about? Karen's cool was gone. She looked like a computer crashing, her mouth opening and closing without words. Then, in a move that sealed her fate, she grabbed the microphone and yelled, "I'm calling the police. This man is harassing me on private property." Here's where it gets good. The same cops who'd shown up for my moving truck rolled in 20 minutes later. Officer Daniels and his rookie partner. Daniels took one look at the scene, sighed, and walked over to me. Frank, you stirring up trouble again? Nah, I said, handing him the documents. Just exposing a scam. Check these out. He skimmed the papers, his eyebrows climbing higher with every page. Then he turned to Karen, who was still ranting about trespassers and conspiracies. Ma'am, he said, his voice flat. These documents check out. The lake's state property? You restricting access and charging fees? That's illegal. The crowd gasped. Karen's jaw dropped, and for the first time, she had nothing to say. Jessica, the reporter, was filming everything, her camera catching every second of Karen's meltdown. So, Ms. Mitchell, she pressed, can you explain why you've been charging residents for access to public land? Karen stammered, her face now purple. I was protecting our community. You don't understand the costs of maintenance. But no one was listening. People were walking away, shaking their heads, some even laughing. Sarah, the mom from across the street, came up to me, tears in her eyes. Thank you. Frank, she whispered. Emma can play by the lake again. Before I could respond, a black SUV pulled up, and out stepped Linda Hayes from the Department of Natural Resources. She was a no-nonsense woman in her 40s, with a clipboard and an air of authority that made Karen shrink. Mr. Johnson, Linda said, shaking my hand. We got your email and documents. We're launching a full investigation into the HOA's activities, effective immediately. Karen tried one last desperate move. This is outrageous, she screamed. I've done nothing but protect this lake. But Linda shut her down cold. Ma'am, we have evidence you've been profiting off state property for years. That's a federal offense. I suggest you get a lawyer. As the crowd dispersed, Karen stood alone by the pavilion, her banners flapping uselessly in the wind. Her husband was packing up the catering tables, avoiding her eyes. I could have gloated, but I didn't. I'd won this round, but something told me Karen wasn't done fighting. People like her don't go down easy. What do you think happens when a bully like Karen gets backed into a corner? Drop a thunderbolt emoji in the comments if you're ready for her to crash and burn. I walked home from that Lake Appreciation Day showdown with a grin I couldn't wipe off my face. The image of Karen standing there, her empire of lies crumbling as the crowd turned on her, was burned into my brain. Lake Serenity sparkled under the late afternoon sun, free at last from her bullshit signs and fees. I could already picture Sarah's kid. Emma, building sandcastles again? Or Walter fishing without looking over his shoulder? Hell, I might even crack a beer by the water myself tonight. But as I kicked off my boots and sank into my couch, a nagging feeling crept in. Karen wasn't the type to slink away quietly. I just humiliated her in front of the whole damn neighborhood and a news crew to boot. People like her don't take that lying down. They double down, and they fight dirty. Sure enough, Monday morning brought the first signs of her counterattack. I woke up to a lawn covered in bright orange flyers, each one screaming "Criminal Alert," with a grainy photo of me unloading my moving truck. The text was pure Karen. This man, Frank Johnson, is a dangerous outsider spreading lies to destroy our community's values. Report suspicious activity to the HOA immediately. I laughed so hard I nearly spilled my coffee. Dangerous? Me? A 62-year-old mechanic who'd rather be fishing than fighting? But the humor faded when I saw the flyers weren't just on my lawn. They were taped to every mailbox, stop sign, and telephone pole in Oakwood Estates. She'd turned my quiet move-in into a damn wanted poster campaign. I ripped one off my mailbox, muttering, "You've got to be shitting me. Karen." This wasn't just petty, it was unhinged. I grabbed my phone and started snapping photos of every flyer I could find, knowing I'd need evidence of her insanity. By noon, things got worse. I stepped outside to check my mail and found my driveway spray painted with the words "liar" and "troublemaker" in red. My trash cans were tipped over, garbage strewn across the grass, and a note pinned to one read, "Leave or regret it." I stood there, fists clenched, feeling the old anger from my younger days bubbling up, the kind that used to get me into bar fights before I learned to keep my temper in check. I called Officer Daniels, who showed up looking like he'd aged a year since Saturday. "Frank," he said, rubbing his temples. "Karen's been blowing up our phones, claiming you're harassing her, says you threatened her at the lake event." "That's a load of crap," I snapped. "She's the one vandalizing my property. Look at this shit." I showed him the photos and the note. He sighed, scribbling in his notebook. "We'll look into it, but she's got half the station on speed dial. Just keep documenting everything." I wasn't about to let Karen scare me off my own damn property, so I installed a couple of cheap security cameras around my house that afternoon. Good thing, too, because Tuesday night, my phone pinged with a motion alert. I checked the footage, and there she was, Karen, in a black hoodie like some wannabe ninja, sneaking onto my porch with a can of spray paint. She scrawled, "Get out," across my front door before scurrying off. I saved the video to the cloud, grinning like a kid on Christmas. "Oh, Karen," I muttered. "You just fucked yourself." Wednesday morning, I marched to the police station with the footage and my growing file of evidence. Flyers, photos, the threatening note. Daniels watched the video, shaking his head. "This is enough for a vandalism charge," he said. "But she's claiming you doctored it. Says you're framing her." "Framing her?" I laughed. "Tell her to explain why her golf cart's in the background, parked in her driveway." Daniels smirked. "We'll handle it. Frank, stay out of trouble, all right?" But trouble had a way of finding me. That evening, I got a call from my internet provider. "Mr. Johnson," the rep said, "we received a complaint that you're using our service for illegal activities. We're suspending your account pending review." "Illegal activities? What the hell are you talking about?" I barked. "Someone reported you for hacking and distributing false documents." She said, "I didn't need to guess who." Karen was pulling every dirty trick in the book, trying to make my life hell. I spent an hour on the phone getting my internet restored, but the message was clear. She wasn't stopping until she drove me out. By Thursday, I'd had enough. I called Linda Hayes at the Department of Natural Resources and sent her everything. Karen's flyers, the vandalism footage, even screenshots of her social media posts bragging about securing the lake for HOA members. Linda's response was immediate. "Frank, this woman's been running a racket on state property for years. We're sending a team tomorrow to start a formal investigation. If she's been charging fees, that's fraud. If she's vandalizing property to silence you, that's criminal." I felt a rush of satisfaction, but I wasn't naive. Karen was like a cornered animal now, and those are the most dangerous kind. Friday morning, I woke up to an email from the HOA, signed by Karen herself, announcing an emergency community meeting that evening to address the threat to our neighborhood's integrity. The email didn't name me, but it might as well have had my face plastered on it. This is it, I thought. Her last stand? The community center was packed when I showed up, my backpack stuffed with every document I'd gathered. Neighbors filled the rows of folding chairs, whispering and glancing at me as I took a seat near the back. Karen stood at the front, her blazer crisp, her sunglasses perched on her head like a crown. She launched into a speech about protecting our values and fighting outsiders who spread lies. It was the same old song, but her voice had an edge now, desperate, almost frantic. "Friends," she said, gripping the podium. "We're under attack by someone who wants to turn our private lake into a public free-for-all. I've uncovered evidence that Frank Johnson is working with outside agitators to undermine our HOA." The room gasped, and all eyes turned to me. I stood up, my temper flaring. "That's a damn lie, Karen, and you know it." I held up my stack of papers. "I've got state documents proving the lake's public. You've been stealing from these people for years, charging them for something you don't own." The crowd erupted, some shouting at Karen, others yelling at me. It was chaos until Linda Hayes walked through the door, flanked by two state officials in khaki uniforms. The room fell silent as she stepped to the podium, her presence shutting Karen up mid-rant. "I'm Linda Hayes, Virginia Department of Natural Resources," she said. Her voice calm but razor-sharp. "We've reviewed evidence provided by Mr. Johnson and conducted our own investigation. Lake Serenity is state property. The HOA's restrictions and fees are illegal. Effective immediately, all HOA lake privileges are revoked." The crowd exploded again, but this wasn't the twist. Oh no, it gets better. Linda held up a folder. "We've also uncovered financial records showing Ms. Mitchell collected over $40,000 in lake access fees over the past 4 years. Those funds were deposited into a personal account, not the HOA's." She paused, letting that sink in. "That's embezzlement, a federal crime." The room went dead quiet. Karen's face drained of color, her mouth hanging open like a fish out of water. "That's not true," she stammered. I was maintaining the lake." "Ma'am," Linda said, "your own social media posts show you bragging about the fees. We have bank statements. Save it for the courtroom." The crowd turned on Karen like a pack of wolves. Neighbors who'd been too scared to speak up were now shouting, demanding answers. Walter stood up, his voice shaking with anger. "You fined me $500 for fishing without a permit. Where's that money, Karen?" Sarah was next, tears streaming down her face. "You threatened to take my daughter away for playing on a public beach. How dare you?" Karen's husband, Gary, slipped out the back door, leaving her alone as the room boiled over. Then came the real kicker. Officer Daniels walked in, holding handcuffs. "Karen Mitchell," he said, "you're under arrest for vandalism, filing false police reports, and suspected fraud." As he cuffed her, Karen screamed, "This is a conspiracy! Frank's framing me!" But no one listened. The news crew was filming. Neighbors were cheering. And I just stood there, watching her kingdom collapse, and it felt good. Damn good. But something told me this wasn't the end. Karen's eyes locked on mine as they led her away, and I saw something darker than anger. She was down, but she wasn't out. What do you do when you've just taken down a tyrant? I stood outside the community center as the police car pulled away. Karen's silhouette slumped in the back seat. The crowd was still buzzing, some cheering, others whispering in shock, their voices blending into a chaotic hum that echoed across Lake Serenity. The news crew was packing up, Jessica the reporter giving me a nod like I'd just won a damn war. And maybe I had. Karen's reign was over, her lies exposed, her power stripped, her ass hauled off in cuffs. I should have been cracking open a beer to celebrate, but as I walked home under the Virginia stars, a heavy feeling settled in my chest. Victory tasted sweet, but it was mixed with a bitter aftertaste I couldn't shake. Karen was a bully, no question. But watching her get dragged away like that, it didn't feel as good as I thought it would. The next few weeks in Oakwood Estates were like a breath of fresh air. Lake Serenity was alive again. Kids splashing in the shallows, old folks strolling along the shore, even a couple of teenagers fishing off the public dock without looking like they were committing a felony. Walter, now interim HOA president, didn't waste a second. He had Karen's members-only signs ripped down and replaced with new ones. Lake Serenity, open to all. Sarah brought Emma to the beach, and I swear that kid's smile as she built a sandcastle could have lit up the whole damn state. I watched from my porch, sipping coffee, feeling like maybe I'd done something right for once. Hell, I even took my old fishing pole out one evening and caught a bass. The first time I'd felt at peace since moving here. But Karen's shadow hung over the neighborhood like a stubborn storm cloud. Her house, 3 doors down, sat empty, curtains drawn, driveway bare except for a for sale sign that went up overnight. Walter filled me in over beers on his porch one night. "Gary's gone," he said, shaking his head. "Moved out the day after her arrest. Said he was done with her schemes. And the legal bills? They're bleeding her dry. She's crashing with a cousin in Richmond, dodging reporters and creditors." I took a swig of my beer, staring at the lake. "She brought it on herself," I said, but my voice was quieter than usual. "Still, losing everything like that? Gotta be rough." Walter nodded, his eyes distant. "She wasn't always a tyrant, frank. After her divorce a few years back, the HOA became her whole world. She got obsessed with control, like it was the only thing keeping her together. Sad, really. Sad wasn't a word I'd have used a month ago, but now it hit me hard. Karen had made my life hell. Flyers, vandalism, fake police reports. But hearing she was broke and alone in some cousin's spare room stirred something in me. I'd wanted justice, not her total destruction. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, thinking about my late wife, Ellen. She used to say, "Frank, being right doesn't mean you gotta crush someone. Sometimes you win by giving them a way out." I hated how much her words made sense now. Then came the moment that changed everything. It was a crisp Tuesday morning, and I was out raking leaves when I saw a figure by the lake, moving slow, like a ghost. It was Karen. No blazer, no sunglasses, just a faded gray sweatshirt and jeans, her blonde hair limp in a messy bun. She looked broken, like the weight of the world had finally crushed her. She was staring at the water, hands stuffed in her pockets, and for a second, I thought she might walk right into it and not come back. I dropped the rake, grabbed 2 beers from my fridge, and headed down to the shore. My boots crunched on the gravel, and she flinched when she heard me. "Frank," she said, her voice barely audible, eyes red and swollen. "What do you want?" "Not here to fight," I said, holding out a beer. "Figured you could use this." She stared at the bottle like it might bite her, then took it, her hands shaking. We sat on a bench by the water, the same one where Emma used to skip rocks. For a long time, neither of us spoke, just sipped our beers and listened to the lake's gentle lapping. Finally, Karen broke the silence. "Why are you doing this?" she asked, her voice cracking. "I tried to ruin you. Called the cops. Trashed your place. Lied about you. Why the hell would you sit here with me?" I leaned back, staring at the horizon. "Because I'm not you. Karen, I didn't take you down to watch you drown. I did it because you were stealing from people. Kids, families, this whole damn community. But I don't get my kicks from seeing you broken." She laughed, a bitter, choked sound. "Broken? Frank, I've lost everything. Gary, my house, my friends, my reputation. I'm sleeping on a couch in Richmond, dodging lawsuits and reporters. I've got nothing left. I didn't say anything right away. Part of me wanted to tell her she'd earned every bit of it. But another part, the part that remembered losing Ellen and feeling like the world had ended, knew what it was like to hit rock bottom. You fucked up, Karen, I said finally. Big time. But that doesn't mean you're done. People can change. Question is, do you want to? She didn't answer, just stared at the lake, tears streaming down her face. I left her there and walked home, my head a mess. I'd spent weeks building a case to bury her, but now I was wondering if I'd gone too far. The next day, I got a call from Linda Hayes at the Department of Natural Resources. Frank, she said, Karen's looking at serious charges, fraud, embezzlement, maybe prison. But we've also found evidence that other HOA board members knew about the lake fees. They're trying to pin it all on her. But we're auditing the whole organization. The HOA could lose its charter? Lose the charter? I said, my stomach dropping. What happens then? Chaos, she replied. No one to manage roads, utilities, community stuff. You'd be starting from scratch. I hung up, my mind spinning. I'd wanted to free the lake, not burn the whole system down. But then it hit me, a crazy, stupid idea that felt like something Ellen would have pushed me to do. What if I didn't just stop at taking down Karen? What if I helped rebuild something better? I called Walter and laid it out. We start a new HOA, I said. Transparent, fair, no bullshit, public lake access, no fees, no power trips. He laughed. You, Frank, running an HOA? After all this? Not running it, I said. Just helping set it up. For Sarah, Emma, you, everyone. Over the next month, I became the guy I never thought I'd be. I met with neighbors, Sarah, Tom, Mrs. Jenkins, and we drafted a new HOA charter. Every rule was voted on, every penny accounted for. We worked with Linda to ensure lake access stayed public, with clear signs and state oversight. The old board members, Karen's cronies, either resigned or moved away, too ashamed to show their faces. Then came the twist I never saw coming. One evening, as I was grilling burgers for a neighborhood barbecue by the lake, a car pulled up. Out stepped Karen, looking like a different person, hair down, no makeup, holding a manila envelope. She walked up to me, nervous as hell. Frank, she said, I wrote something for the community. Will you read it? I took the envelope. Skeptical. Inside was a letter, handwritten, addressed to Oakwood Estates. It was an apology, raw, honest, no excuses. She admitted to the fees, the lies, the bullying. She wrote about her divorce, how she'd clung to power to feel whole, and how she'd lost herself in the process. I'm not asking for forgiveness. It ended. I just want you to know I'm sorry, and I'm trying to be better. I looked at her, stunned. You want me to share this? She nodded. I'm moving away, starting over. But I needed to do this first. I read the letter at the next community meeting. The room was silent. Then Sarah stood up, tears in her eyes. I hated you, Karen, she said. But this, it means something. Others nodded, some even clapped. Karen wasn't there to see it. She'd already left for good, but her letter was the final piece of healing we didn't know we needed. As I stood by Lake Serenity that night, watching families laugh and kids play, I realized Ellen was right. Justice wasn't about crushing someone. It was about giving them a chance to make things right. I'd fought for the lake, but I'd won something bigger, a community that felt like home. What's your take on second chances? Drop a heart emoji in the comments if you think everyone deserves one.